You just gonna set it up. Keep flying. I was just waiting for those horns. Should be coming soon, right? What you feeling down for? No, I like that. I like that. Don't be sad. Open your eyes. The sun is shining. The angels are dancing in heaven. You hear me?
Wake up, people, wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up, people, wake up now.
Wake up.
Wake up, people, wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up the people, Lord, wake up.
Wake
Listen.
up.
Father God, in your name I pray. Help the people find their way. Better days are coming by and by. We can make it if we try. Come on. Wake up the people, Lord, wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up, people, wake up now.
Wake up.
Wake up the people, Lord, wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up, people, wake up now.
Wake up.
Father God, in your name I pray. Help the people find their way. Look around and then I see a little old man and a homeless lady. They don't have no food to eat. Father, give them a warm place to sleep. Come on, wake up the people, wake up.
Wake up, wake up, wake up.
Wake up the people, Lord, wake up. Wake up, people, wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up, people, wake up now.
Wake up. Wake up.
Yes, greetings family, this is Brother Jegna, bringing you another Afrocentricity book show. It is every Sunday, yes, 4 till 6 p.m. The Afrocentricity book show. Please ensure that you tell your family and friends. This is the best book show you will find on the airwaves. Or always remember, this show is sponsored by Glass R Us. You can find Glass R Us at 730 Seven Sisters Road, N15 5NH. You can get Glass R Us on 0208 800 6663. That is 0208 800 6663. Please go to Glass R Us for all your glazing needs. So whether it's glass repairs, double glazing, shelving, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shower cubicles, balustrades, balconies, you name it, please go to Glass R Us for all your glazing needs. Please mention this show and you will get a 10% discount. Yep, Glass R Us, 7307 Sisters Road. So what are we doing? We are continuing to read the great book called The Black Jacobins by the author C.L.R. James. That is The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. We are in the 5th chapter. Do not forget the studio number. If you want to text in, send your messages in, please. It's 079 44 431 366. That's 07 944 431 366. Please send your comments in, questions, and we'll be right on the case. We'll sort it out, okay? So, the Black Jacobins. Hope you guys have had a good week, yeah? So, Black Jacobins, we are where at the moment the Haitian Revolution has started. Remember, the island at this time is called Santa or Saint Domingo, later Santo Domingo in Spanish, yeah? but the revolution has started. At the moment, there are many different groups on the island. There are obviously the Africans, the former enslaved people who have risen, but there's also the so-called mulattoes, which are the mixed-race people. There are whites from France. There are whites who were born on the island, what they call Creole. The British have landed on the island. The British want to re-enslave the Africans. The British like to talk about the British values and how they ended slavery. They're on the island to re-enslave the Africans again. Remember? So, Toussaint Louverture, he has risen. He's a leader, or he's a rising leader now, of the African people. Okay? So, I'll continue. We are on page 134. This is The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. If ever there was a good thing, this looked like one. Petitions from all parts of the island assured the British that they would be welcome by all persons possessing property. And who else in San Domingo mattered? All expenses were to be repaid by the revenues of San Domingo. General Coila told Dundas that he entertained no apprehensions of our successes in the West Indies. Pitt and Dundas pressed the expedition on, with a reckless disregard for even the safety of Britain. Dundas was very nearly out of temper at some delay. For Pitt, the West Indies was the first point to make certain. What San Domingo meant in those days can be judged from the fact that though the French invasion threatened Britain, even that was not to delay the dispatch of the expedition. Additional exertions will then be necessary to make the country take care of its own internal defence. 2 years later, this same Dundas will tell Parliament that the war in the West Indies was on part of this country, not a war for riches or local aggrandizement, but for war for security. Dundas knew that not a single member of Parliament would believe him, but Parliament has always agreed to speak in those terms in order to keep the people quiet. On September the 9th, the British expedition of 900 men left Jamaica and landed at Jeremie on the 19th. Property owners are the most energetic flag wavers and patriots in every country, but only so long as they enjoy their possessions. To safeguard those, they desert God, king and country in a twinkling. All property San Domingos rushed to welcome the British, the defenders of slavery. Soldiers like the brothers Rigard and Bivets and the detachments they commanded. Politicians like Pinochet stayed with the French, but the mulatto proprietors, particularly those in the West Province, preferred their slaves to liberty and equality. All the fighting around Port-au-Prince, remember Port-au-Prince is the capital, all the fighting around Port-au-Prince was forgotten. When Bouvet remonstrated to Savary, the mulatto mayor of Saint-Marc, Savary did not disguise his view. So long as the proclamations of the civil commissioners assured a happy and prosperous future, I carried out all their instructions. But from the moment that I saw that they were preparing the thunderbolt, which is bursting on all sides, I took measures to safeguard our fellow citizens and preserve our property. OJ's brother went with Savary. With such a welcome, nothing could stop the British. By the beginning of 1794, they were in possession of the whole of the seaboard of the Gulf of Port-au-Prince, excepting the capital, the whole of the West Province, most of the South, except for a small territory held by Rigard's troops, and the important fortress of the Mole St. Nicholas. From the other West Indian islands came even more startling news of the triumph of Britain and the counter-revolution. On February the 3rd, a British force of 7,000 men and 19 vessels sailed from Barbados, and in 2 months had captured Martinique, St. Lucia and Guadeloupe. Williamson, governor of Jamaica, had information in Likiap itself. All the people of property were waiting to receive them. He wrote to Dundas, the prodigious trade that they were now doing in Saint Domingue, and hoped that the trade would correspondingly improve British enemies. Dundas congratulated him heartily on this surprisingly quick success. It was a crucial moment in world history. If the British could hold San Domingo, the finest colony in the world, there would once more be a power in America, in American waters. Instead of being abolitionists, they would be the most powerful practitioners and advocates of the slave trade, on a scale excelling anything that they had done before. But there was another, more urgent issue. If the British completed the conquest of San Domingo, the colonial empire of revolutionary France was gone, its vast resources would be directed into British pockets, and Britain will be able to return to Europe and throw army and navy against the revolution. Sonathax, Poverel, and Levieux knew this and fought to save San Domingo. Excuse me. If it is necessary to hide in a double and triple range of hills, said Sonathax to his followers in Lekiap, I will show you the way. So let me say, Sonathax, Poverel, and Levieux are French whites on the island who really are hoping to hang on to the island for France. But obviously Britain have landed on the island now, and Britain has got other ideas. I will show you the way. We shall have no other asylum than cannons, no other food than water and bananas, but we shall live and we shall die free. The British tried to bribe Levieux, for revolutionaries were of course of low fellows, who act as they do for money or ambition. Levieux, a nobleman under the old regime, called out Major James Grant. Whoever declined, let us perish, citizens, wrote Sonathax to one of his officers. Let us perish 1,000 times rather than permit the people of San Domingo to fall again into the enslavement and servitude. If we are defeated, we shall leave for the English only bones and ashes. The British called on him to surrender Port-au-Prince. With a handful of men, he disdainfully refused, and the British retired. But at the end of May, a united force of British soldiers and French emigres attacked the town. Traitors let them into an important fort on the outskirts, and Sonathax and Poverel, escorted by Levieux and a small detachment of blacks, fled to Jacamel. It was June the 4th, and the English celebrated the capture of the capital on the birthday of the king. The rest now was only a matter of days. Toussaint, a Spanish officer and therefore an ally of the British, saw all his secret hopes being wrecked by the British victories. He was following the progress of abolition in England, but from the time there seemed a real possibility of getting San Domingo, the abolition bill began its long career as a hardy annual. French Republic, British constitutional monarchy, Spanish autocracy. Though one might smile and another frown according to the exigencies of the moment, none troubled to disguise that in the last analysis, the African, he says Negro, yeah, the African could expect either the overseer's whip or the bayonet. Once the British were masters of San Domingo, then the Spaniards and the British would turn on the blacks and drive them back into slavery. Sonathax had abolished slavery, but he had no authority to do so. It was the Republican government in France alone which could decide this, and the Republican government spoke no word. Despite the feelings for the slaves in France, the convention did nothing for over a year. As long as Brissot and the Girondins remained in power, no word would be said about the slaves. But Brissot and his party could not last. They would not check the speculations of the bourgeoisie with the currency, and they would not fix a maximum prices for the food. They would not tax the rich to pay for the war. They would not pass the legislation necessary to abolish the feudal dues, and they would not ratify the seizures of land by the peasants. Being afraid of Paris would not bring the whole country under a strong central government, and despite incessant royalist insurrection and plotting, they stuck to a federal system, whereby the bourgeoisie in the provinces would be beyond control of the revolutionary Paris. If you remember, the French Revolution has just happened, so there's chaos in Paris as well, and in France. It was, and not the Robespierre and the Mountain, who instituted the revolutionary tribunals, aimed not against the counter-revolution, but against all those who propose any agrarian law or any other law subversive to territorial, commercial, or industrial prosperity. Robespierre was no communist, but he was prepared to go further than the Girondins and the masses, who by now knew what they wanted. They turned from Girondins and gave their support to Robespierre and the Mountain, the extreme left. Dumouriez, the Girondin general commanding in the field, deserted to the counter-revolution. The Paris masses, deserting the Paris Commune, hitherto the real revolutionaries, centre in Paris, organized an independent centre of their own, the famous Evanche. And on May 31st and June the 2nd, with firmness but great moderation, made the Girondin leaders retire from the convention, placing them only under house arrest and offering hostages out of their own ranks as guarantees for their safety. When history is written, as it ought to be written, it is the moderation and long patience of the masses at which men will wonder, not their ferocity. The Girondins escaped and, going to the provinces, joined the counter-revolution. In those difficult days, Robespierre and the Mountain gave France a strong government. The convention abolished the feudal laws at last, put an end to the most crying abuses, and won the confidence of the people. Despite the political intrigues of the leaders, the government, while hostile to communism, took the people into its confidence, and for it nobody else depended on it. A rare exaltation of sacrifice and devotion moved through the revolutionary France and Paris. As in Russia under Lenin and Trotsky, the people were told honestly of victory or of defeat. Errors were openly acknowledged, and where to this day reaction can only see a few thousand people who fell under this guillotine, Paris between March 1793 and July 1794 was one of the supreme epochs of political history. Never until 1917 were masses ever to have such a powerful influence, for it was no more than influence upon any government. In these few months of the nearest approach to power, they did not forget the blacks. They felt towards them as a brother, and the old slave owners, who they knew to be supporters of the counter-revolutions, they hated as if Frenchmen themselves had suffered under the whip. It was not Paris alone, but all revolutionary France. Servants, in speech marks, servants, peasants, workmen, the labourers of the day in the fields, all over France were filled with a virulent hatred against the aristocracy of the skin. There were many so moved by the sufferings of the slaves that they had long ceased to drink coffee, thinking of it drenched with the blood and sweat of men turned into brutes. Nobles and generous working people of France and those millions of honest Englishmen, of English nonconformists, who listened to the clergy and gave strength to the English movement for the abolition of slavery. These are the people whom the sons of Africa and the lovers of humanity will remember with gratitude and affection. Not the pruriating liberals of France, nor the philanthropy plus 5% hypocrites of the British Houses of Parliament. This was the France to which in January 1794, 3 deputies sent to San Domingo by the convention arrived. Billet, who was an African slave, who had purchased his freedom, Mills, a mulatto, and Dufay, a white man. On February the 3rd, they attended their first session. What happened there was quite unpremeditated. The chairman of the Committee on Degrees addressed the convention. Citizens, your Committee on Degrees has been verified, and the credentials of the dispute from San Domingo, it finds them in order, and I move that they be admitted to their places in the convention. Cambalays rose. Since 1789, the aristocracy of birth and the aristocracy of religion had been destroyed, but the aristocracy of the skin still remains. That too is now at its last gasp, and equality has been consecrated. A black man, a yellow man are about to join the convention in the name of the free citizens of San Domingo. 3 deputies of San Domingo entered the hall. The black face of Belay and the yellow face of Mills excited long and repeated bursts of applause. Lacroix followed. The assembly had been anxious to have within it some of these men of color who have suffered oppression for so many years. Today it has 2 of them. I demand that their introduction be marked by the President's fraternal embrace. The motion was carried amidst applause. The 3 deputies of San Domingo advanced to the President and received a fraternal kiss, while the hall rang with fresh applause. Next day, Belay, the African, delivered a long and fiery oration, pledging the blacks to the cause of the revolution and asking the convention to declare slavery abolished. It was fitted that an African and an ex-slave should make the speech, which introduced one of the most important legislative acts ever passed by any political assembly. No one spoke after Belay. Instead, Levasseur moved a motion. When drafting up the Constitution of the French people, we paid no attention to the unhappiness of the Negroes, as he says here. Prosperity will bear us a great reproach for that. Let us repair the wrong. Let us proclaim the liberty of the Africans. Mr. President, do not suffer the convention to dishonor itself by discussion. The assembly rose in acclamation. The 2 deputies of color appeared on the tribune and embraced while the applause rolled out around the hall from members and visitors. Lacroix led the mulatto and the Africans to the President, who gave them the presidential kiss. When the applause started again, Cambon drew the attention of the House to an incident which had taken place among the spectators. A citizeness of color who regularly attends the sittings of the convention has just felt so keen a joy at seeing us give liberty to all her brethren that she has fainted. There was applause. I demand that this fact be mentioned in the minutes. and that the citizeness be admitted to the sitting and receive at least as much recognition of her civic virtues. The motion was carried, and a woman walked to the front bench of the amphitheatre and sat to the left of the president, drying her tears amidst more bursts of cheering. Lacroix, who had spoken the day before, then proposed the drafting of the decree. I demand that the Minister of Marine be instructed to dispatch at once advices to the colonies to give them the happy news of their freedom. And I propose the following decree. The National Convention declares slavery abolished in all the colonies. In consequence, it declares that all men, without distinction of colour, domiciled in colonies, are French citizens and enjoy all the rights assured under the Constitution. Gone was all the talking and fumbling, the sabotage of the Benaves, the convenient memory of the Brissots. In 1789, Gregoire had proposed equality for the mulattoes and gradual abolition. He had been treated as anyone would be treated who, for in the Union of South Africa today, proposed merely social and political equality for educated Africans and relief from slavery of the past laws for the rest. Like Gregoire, he would be denounced as a Bolshevik and would be lucky to escape lynching. Yet when the masses turned, as they will turn one day, and tried to end the tyranny of centuries, not only the tyrants but all civilization hold up its hands in horror and clamour for order be restored. If a revolution carries high overhead expenses, most of them it inherits from the greed of the reactionaries and the cowardice of the so-called moderates. Long before abolition, the mischief had been done to the French colonies, and it was not abolition but the refusal to abolish which had done it. At that time slavery had been overturned only in San Domingo of all the French colonies, and the general spontaneity of the convention was only a reflection of the overflowing desire which filled all France to end tyranny and oppression everywhere. But the generosity of the revolution, the generosity of the revolutionary spirit, was at that time the soundest political policy. Robespierre was not present at the session and did not approve the steps. Danton knew that the convention had been swept off his feet by an excess of feeling, and thought that it ought to have been more cautious, but that masters of revolutionary tactics could not fail to see that the decree, by ratifying the liberty which the blacks had won, was giving them a concrete interest in the struggle against the British and Spanish reaction. The English are done for, he shouted. Pitt and his plots are riddled. Remember, Pitt is the Prime Minister of Britain. But while the revolution swelled with justifiable pride, the rich fumed, remaining shameless and obstinate. As soon as the decree was passed, the maritime bourgeoisie sent to the deputies of the convention an address on the occasion of the enfranchisement of the Africans. Bravo! 100 times bravo, our masters. This is the cry for which all of our places and businesses resound. When the public press comes each day and brings the details of your great operations, certainly we have all the time to read them at leisure, since we have no longer any work to do. There is no longer any shipbuilding in our ports, still less construction of boats. The manufacture are deserted, and the shops are closed. Thus, thanks to your sublime decrees, every day is a holiday for the workers. We can count more than 300,000 in our different towns who have no other occupation than arms folded, to talk about the news of the day, the rights of man and the Constitution. It is true that every day that they become more hungry, but whoever thinks of the stomach when the heart is glad? The convention bourgeoisie itself was not too happy after the first excitement was over, but the masses and the radicals hailed the decree as another great clearance in the forest of abuses. And let me remind you, this is the Afrocentricity Book Show. We are reading The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. It was not known exactly when the news reached the West Indies, but on June the 5th, the day after the celebrations of the King's birthday and the capture of Port-au-Prince, the English commanders at St. Kitts heard that 7 French ships had escaped the British fleet and landed in Guadeloupe. In command, Victor Hughes and Mulatto, one of the great personalities of the French Revolution, to whom nothing was impossible, taken from his post as public prosecutor in Rochefort and sent to the West Indies. Hughes brought only 1,500 men, but he brought also the convention's message to the blacks. There was no black army in the Windward Islands, as in San Domingo. He had to make one out of the raw slaves, but he gave them the revolutionary message and dressed them in the colours of the Republic. The black army fell on the victorious British, began to drive them out of the French colonies, and then carried the war to the British Islands. Toussaint Louverture is his full name. Toussaint got the news of the decree sometime in May. The fate of the French in San Domingo was hanging by a thread. But now that the decree of Sonothax was ratified in France, he did not hesitate a moment, but at once told Laveur that he was willing to join him. Laveur, overjoyed, accepted the offer and agreed to make him a brigadier general. And Toussaint responded with vigour and audacity that left all of San Domingo gasping. He sent to the destitute Laveur some good ammunition from the Spanish stores. He then persuaded those of his followers who were with him to change over, and all agreed. French soldiers, ex-slaves, and the rank and file, and all of his officers, black and white royalists, who had deserted the Republic to join him. His demeanour at the Mass was so devout that De Hemona, who watching him communicate one day, commented that God, if he came to earth, could not visit a purer spirit than Toussaint Louverture. One morning in June, Toussaint, having communicated with his usual devotion, fell on the startled Bissau and routed his troops. Then in a campaign as brilliant as the one by which he had captured the line of camps for the Spanish, he recaptured them for the French, either conquering them or winning over the commanders and men, so that when he joined the French, he had 4,000 troops. The North Province was almost recaptured, and the Spaniards, Bissau and Jean-Francois, were not only routed but demoralized. The British, having received some overdue reinforcements, were already calculating how much of the conquered San Domingo they could wrangle from the Allies, the Spanish. In these matters, the more we have, the better our pretensions, wrote Dundas to Williamson. On them, just about to swallow the prize, Toussaint turned with one of his tigerish leaps. He captured all of their positions on the right bank of the Artibonite and drove them across the river, and, but for the succession of unexpected misfortune, would have taken their stronghold in St. Mark. So that is the end of the 5th chapter. So maybe a little summary of what's happened there. Toussaint had gone over to the Spanish, yeah? Toussaint with many of the Africans. He also had mulattoes, so-called the mixed race, and he also had whites under his troops. He went to the Spanish and used the Spanish to get to rearm themselves because they had no arms. But when the French now said that slavery was abolished in San Domingo, he left the Spanish and went back to the French side and started to fight against the British who was on island and fought against whichever the French he needed to fight against. And now he became a Frenchman again. So you can see in the island, they were going from Spanish to French, the British are on island. It's not really just a simple picture. There's many different groups on island who are always fighting for their own, for their own needs and the best interests of themselves. So, chapter 5. I must remind you, this is Brother Jegna. This is the Afrocentricity book show every Sunday, 4 till 6. We are reading The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. So, chapter 6, which is called The Rise of Toussaint. The relation of forces in San Domingo was now completely changed, and although few recognized it fully at the time, Toussaint and the blacks were henceforth the decisive factors of the revolution. Toussaint was now a French officer in command of an army of some 5,000 men, holding a line of camps or fortified positions between the North Province and the West, and had pushed his way into the West Province as far as the right bank of the Artibonite. Rigaud, who was a mulatto, in the south had taken the lead over Beauvais and was occupied with his own campaign against the British. The Republic, weak on the sea, could send no assistance. Both British and Spaniards, thanks to the British fleet and the British wealth, were well supplied with money and arms. The British were in possession of some of the most fertile districts of the colony, and the formerly rich North Plain, though now held again by the French, was practically devastated. The owners of property betrayed the Republic at every turn. All that the Republic had to offer was liberty and equality, but they were not enough. But they were enough. For years, Pitt and Dundas continued to pour men and money into the West Indies against what they were pleased to call the brigands. Helped by the climate, the black labourers, so recently slaves, and the loyal mulattoes, led by their own officers, inflicted on Britain the severest defeat that has befallen a British expeditionary force between the days of Elizabeth and the Great War. The full story remained hidden for over a century, until it was unearthed in 1906 by Fortescue, the historian of the British Army. He puts the blame on Pitt and Dundas, who had full warning that on this occasion they would have to fight not only poor, sickly Frenchmen, but also but the African population of the West Indies. Yet they poured their troops into the pestilent lands, in expectation that thereby they would destroy the power of France, only to discover, when it was too late, that they had practically destroyed the British Army. Lavieux, who was now in sole charge of the colony, Sonothax and Poverel having been recalled, accused of treason and all other crimes by some of the emigrant colonists. They had abandoned the monarchy, embraced Jacobins, and managed to achieve this much before the decree on February the 4th. But though Toussaint dutifully informed his chief at every step, he was practically unchecked, or in unchecked command of the bulk of the forces of his district. Everything depended on the army. The majority of Toussaint's rank and file were Africans born out of the colony, unable to speak two words of French. In Jean-Francois' scornful phrase, the chief officers were, like Toussaint himself, ex-slaves. Beside Dessalines, there was Christophe, who had left the hotel to seek Toussaint's band in the mountains, his brother, Paul Louverture, and Moise, who had crossed the Atlantic as a child and was adopted by Toussaint, passing as his nephew. The army, except for a few white officers, was a revolutionary army through and through, and that was its greatest strength. If the Republic, liberty and equality gave the army its morale, its centers were Toussaint himself. He had his first command in October 1792, and in less than 2 years we find him writing more than once that a long experience has taught him the necessity of being himself on the spot. Otherwise things will never go well. His presence had that electrifying effect characteristic of a great man of action. I put before them the position of the enemy and the absolute necessity of driving him off. The brave Republican Moise, J.B. Paperet, and Dessalines and Noel answered in the name of all the chiefs that they would brave any sort of danger, that they would go anywhere, and that they would follow me to the end. That's Toussaint's words. The ranks, although exhausted, responded in the same way, and marched against the musket and cannon, without drawing a single weapon, guns or bandoliers. Nothing, said Toussaint, could resist the valor of the sans-culottes. On one occasion, when ammunition had given out, they fought with stones. He lived for the men and charged at their head. If cannon was to be moved, he himself helped, once getting a hand badly crushed in the process. All who knew him, the few months before, when he was merely old Toussaint, he shared all their toils and dangers. But he himself, but he was self-contained, impenetrable, and stern, with the habit and manner of a born aristocrat. I have received your letter, as well as the minutes of your meeting. He writes to some of his officers, I have noted with pleasure the manner in which you have repulsed the enemy, and I have only praise for the way in which you have exterminated him with a courage worthy of good Republican. So this is the British are exterminating. But I see, citizens, with much pain that the orders which I have given you 3 times running to move on to the territory onto the territory of your enemies and drive them from it have not been put into execution. If you had condescended to execute the orders which I had sent you, all of the camps on the other side of the Arbonne would have been destroyed. You have trampled my orders into the dust. His extraordinary abilities, his silence, the sharpness of his tongue when he spoke, kept even the most trusted officer at a distance. They worshipped him, but feared rather than loved him. Even Dessalines, the tiger, was afraid of Toussaint, and his excessive reserve and aloofness, though they grew on him and would one day have their full consequences, were an inestimable value in those early undisciplined days. The troops were without even food and had to go looking for sugarcane. Even when some arms did arrive in August, they were no good. I have received 2,000 guns, but they are in bad condition. I shall get them repaired. Many are too short, and these I shall give to the dragoons. Many of the guns in the 7th and 8th regiments are no good. The British and Spaniards, having all they wanted, and knowing the conditions of Toussaint's men, sent agents among them, offering them arms and accoutrements and good pay. From Lavaux to the labourers, the British made their offers of money. There was no record or any notable success with Toussaint's men. The morale of the Revolutionary Army was too high, Toussaint had the advantage of liberty and equality, the slogans of the revolution. They were great weapons in the age of slaves, but weapons must be used, and he used them with a fencer's finesse and skill. Bands of Maroons infested the war area. The most powerful, a band of 5,000 under Didouin, Regard, and Bouvet, were trying to get him to cooperate with them. But Didouin distrusted them. He said he did not want to obey any mulatto, and he entered into negotiations with the British. The British had made all arrangements to buy him over, but the millstone around their necks in this campaign was their reactionary policy. They could not even lie on a large scale. It was too dangerous, for their rich allies would have deserted them at once. They had to be careful even about making arrangements with the Didouin. They got suspicious and withdrew. Bouvet and Regard heard about Didouin's negotiation with the British and begged Toussaint to use his influence. With a single one of his dictated letters, Toussaint changed the whole situation. In speech marks, I cannot believe the painful rumors that are spread about you, that you have abandoned your country to ally yourself with the English, sworn enemies of liberty and equality. Can it be possible that, my dear friend, that at the very moment when France triumphs over all the royalists and recognizes us for her children by a beneficent decree on the 9th of Thermidor, accords us all the rights for which we are fighting, that you should let yourself be deceived by our ancient tyrants who are only using one half of our unhappy brothers in order to load the other with chains. For a time the Spaniards had blinded eyes, but I did not take long to recognize their rascality. I abandoned them, and I have beaten them well. I returned to my country, which receives me with open arms and has recompensed my services well. I beg of you, my dear brother, to follow my example. If special reason prevent you from having confidence in General Regard or Bouvet, Governor Louvard, who is a good father to all of us, and in whom our mother country has placed his confidence, should at least deserve yours. I hope that you will not refuse me. Who am I? Who am a black as yourself? And I assure you, I wish nothing more than to see you happy, you and all your brothers. As far as I am concerned, I believe that our only hope of this is serving the French Republic. It is under its flag that we are only true and free and equal. And that is how I see it, my dear friend. I do not believe that I am making a mistake. The letter is worth an immediate second reading. Every sentence hits home. So Toussaint is begging with, kind of pleading with another African, who obviously leading troops, to come back to the French side, because only French have offered us kind of true freedom and equality. Obviously this is going to change later on, but at the moment, with all the hype and all the adrenaline and euphoria of the French Revolution, remember the masses rose up against the royals, and it was like, yeah, we hate, because they've been oppressed themselves by the rich royals. So because of that, they said, let's free everybody there. We hate anybody who's under oppression. But unfortunately, colour will come back into it sooner or later, and the freedom for the Africans will not be the freedom for the Africans forever. And this is the Afrocentricity Book Show. This is Brother Jegna. We'll be taking a short break soon, so let me continue. We're reading chapter 5 of The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. It is possible that the English have succeeded in deceiving you. Believe me, my dear brother, abandon them. Unite yourself to honest republicans. And altogether, let us chase these royalists from our country. They are rascals who wish to burden us again with those shameful chains that we have had so much trouble to break. He begged for unity. Remember, my dear friend, that the French Republic is the one and indivisible. And it is that which gives me strength and has made it victorious all over our enemies. Time would show to what degree Toussaint was a sincere in these constant references to the French Republic. His envoys took this letter to Doudoin's camp and read it to the assembled troops. When the blacks heard it, they burst out invectives against Doudoin and his friends, conclusive proof that they knew that they were ignorant and unable to pick their way among the masses of proclamations, lies and promises and traps which surrounded them. Yet they wanted to fight for liberty. La Plume, Doudoin's second-in-command, profiting by this disillusionment, arrested Doudoin and two of his followers on the spot. So that's the power of Toussaint's letter. This also was the work of Toussaint, who had instructed his men that if Doudoin was completely won over by the British, they were to take some other chiefs aside and with utmost energy show them that they were being deceived. Doudoin was thrown into prison, but La Plume, instead of joining Regard and Bouvet, joined Toussaint's forces. With 3,000 men, Toussaint wrote hastily to Louvet, begging him to make La Plume the colonel. I assure you that this will produce the best effect. And Louvet sanctioned the appointment. Regard and Bouvet could hardly have been too pleased. A force of 3,000 men was an immense acquisition. And Toussaint had won them by a letter and a deputation. So as you can see, Toussaint's showing a lot of great wisdom there. Rather than just fighting, he would use the words, yeah? His pen became his sword. If the army was the instrument of Toussaint's power, the masses were its foundation, and his power grew with his influence over them. Just out of degradation of slavery, they had come into a world of indiscriminate murder and violence. The Spaniards invited 800 French back from the United States to Port-au-Prince. After a church sermon, the priest Vasquez gave the signal to Jean-Francois, who had spent the morning with him in the confessional box. The Spanish soldiers joined with Jean-Francois' band and quietly murdered over 1,000 French people, men, women and children. They at least will never claim their property again. Such were the models of civilization for the ex-slaves. Great tracts of the West Province were continually being fought over, devastated and burnt. In the war areas, the rich and poor, black and white, all starved. Little wonder that the black labourers were constantly in a state of insurrection. Fear of the restoration of slavery was always the cause of the trouble. The British had no intention of abolishing slavery, neither had the Spaniards. Permission to form black regiments was only given in 1795. And even then, it was most positively forbidden that any who served with the British should be promised freedom. But they could not keep that up, and the British got blacks to fight on their side after paying them. All parties confused the ignorant Negroes by playing on their fears and accusing every other party, the French and Toussaint himself, of wishing to restore slavery. The British and Spaniards could second their propaganda with offers of money and guns. Jean-Francois told the blacks that only a king had authority to make them free, and therefore they must fight for the Spanish king. Some planters hid the decree from the slaves. The blacks already distrusted the white planters. And now machinations of British and Spaniards were teaching those who were learning to understand that politics is nearly all whites. that nearly all whites in the colonies were the same, birds of prey feeding on the ignorance and inexperience of the great masses of the black labourers. For these blacks lacking civic discipline, running wild in a country torn by revolution and war, knowing only that they wanted to remain free, yet confused and deceived by all parties. For them, Toussaint had a deep and passionate sympathy. "Oh, you African, my brothers," he addresses them in a proclamation. You who have cost me so many fatigues, so much labour, so much worry. You whose liberty is sealed with more than half of your own blood. How long will I have the mortification of seeing my misled children fly the counsels of thy father who idolizes them? Autocrat though he was, this was the way he felt about his people. It was always the blacks who suffered the most. It was an expression often on his lips, and one can feel his spontaneous horror at the news of the rising provoked by the British among the cultivators of a district in the north. You will not have much difficulty in divining whence once has come this terrible blow. It is then possible that the labourers will always be the playthings and instruments of the vengeance of those monsters whom hell have loosed upon this colony. The blood of so many victims cries for vengeance, and humans and divine justice cannot delay to confound the guilty. So I'm going to take a break there. This is the Afrocentricity Book Show with Brother Jegna. We're going to take a short break, okay? So we'll have a musical break, and then we will be back, okay? So I'll see you shortly after the break.
Oh, baby, do baba do da. Oh, I've got something I like to say. It's rather colorful, but I'll say it anyway. Black is our color. Is her name. Health, strength, prosperity, and wisdom is our game. Those black we are, and black we will always be. Black in the sight of everyone is so beautiful to see. Ah, da da, baby, yeah. Come on and show me how really black you are, baby. Ooh, baba doo da. Oh. Come at last, black man progressing in every way. Cause black we are, and black we will always be. Black in the sight of everyone is so beautiful to see. Oh now baby, come on and show me how really black you are, oh my darling, oh baby, oh baby, ooh baba Oh.
But more time you don't know, sir. Only Mount Zion, that's where the foundation built. Well, to listen, you know, so everything that the full before it spill. Let's see. Oh Lord, well make them know Babylon why you scrape, you spill. What we don't have, every ghetto youth will can't take. Oh, no better be still. And left from boy, you call your gun and draw nil. Hey, yo, why you scrape, you spill. What we don't have, every ghetto youth will can't take. Oh, no better be still. And left from boy, you call your gun and draw nil. Oh, yeah, man,
Babylon, you them brain to them and get to you them figure down the drain. Babylon, use them brain. They mark hard beats the whole of them a broken. Babylon, use them brain. Them all fight against German, them a shipping cocaine. Babylon, use them brain. With them genocide all mind them a go burning a flame. Oh, what agony and oh, what a shame to see my black brother going right down the drain. Man made to suffer and no man to feel pain. They break my mommy, my sister, I say, oh, what a shame. Brother and my father, fish up sugar cane. On the plantation and that's stress and shame. On the man, on them foot, I just the shackles and chain. Now them take it off and put it on them brain. To them ammunition, figure down the drain. Now the youth, them realize to shout the highly name. Man no pet lion, that mean we can't tame. One thing is our desire, one thing is aim. This a wicked Babylon and them a go down the drain.
Babylon, why you scrape, you spill. What we don't have, every ghetto youth will can't take. Oh, no better be still. And left from boy, you call you gonna get killed. Oh, what a crisis you would cry. Face this could them a come with them kit just to take every bit. Nothing man know, you are the boss for your kids. But oh, I say here, you won't believe in it. I tell them no, could they adopt the board and practice. Now I see them on the face and on them own of vomit. Hey, you're not being kind. I want you up but now you leave us behind. Now something drop from your bag, nothing not touch it cause of mine. Once you want to also no forgive we every time. Babylon,
use them brain. Show them on the ghetto, you them figure down the drain. Babylon, use them brain. They mark hard this whole lot them a broken. Babylon, use them brain. Them all fight against German, them a shipping cocaine. Babylon, use them brain. With them genocide all mind them a go burn in a flame. But this is one thing I cannot overstand. Them no teach me nothing about me Asian clan. In the school and the college and the institution, the curriculum that I get is European. They teach me about Marco Polo and Napoleon. Not teach me nothing about the River Nile Bank, where civilization it began. You said thou shalt not steal and should not kill no one. Still you steal, treasurize and then you teach wrong.
Slave and you murder all me dad and me mom.
But we kill Babylonian, you will love to burn.
Tell them turn down, fire burn. All politicians are causing dispute, making us their plan. Where your dishonesty and war is their illustration. Competing, this is more than competition. Could let them fighting just to enslave black man. I know them parties just a cause be partition.
Black people may I talk to straight. I want every black person listening to this song to hug yourself and say, we've come a long way. Yeah. This one is personal. Black people, my people, when will we overstand? Yes, that they're trying all their best to wipe us off the land. Wake up now, take a stand. It's Armageddon. Rebel against partiality. Be proud us Africans, 'cause I hate to see you bleach away the memories. 500 years and more of brutal slavery, while we're leaning on the cross of Calvary. It's wiping out the black majority, literally. Sha-la-la-la-la-la-la. I sing 'cause I love you, my people. Listen when I tell you, sha-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Don't make them kill you. Get up for your rights, stand up for your rights. The Rosa Parks paved the way just for nothing at all. Mandela went to prison and it was for us all. Marcus Garvey, Martin Luther King, Malcolm the ball. I think we now go ready till we're back against the wall. Ellis Kelly, Andrea Williams Green. Keep on teaching, running African queens. All freedom fighters, past and present, we salute you. Let the blessings of the elders go before you. My people, what is wrong with us? Are we gonna just give in and let them conquer us? Look around, the signs are everywhere. New Orleans to the motherland, we will have to save our nation. Stand strong, la-la-la-la-la-la. Sing 'cause I love you, my people. Listen when I tell you, tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Don't make them fool you. Get up for your rights, stand up for your rights. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Sing 'cause I love you, my people. Listen when I tell you, oh Mama Africa, we cry for you. All of us love you. Get up for your rights, stand up for your rights now. Black people, my people, when will we understand, yes, that they're trying all their best to wipe us off the land? Wake up now, take a stand.
That was the great Queen Africa with the song Black People. So this is the Afrocentricity Book Show. We are now into the final hour. We are reading C.L.R. James, his book, great book, The Black Jacobins. So I must remind you that this show is sponsored by Glass Are Us. You can find Glass Are Us at 7307 Sisters Road, London N15. You can get them on 0208 800 6663. That's 0208 800 6663. Please go to Glass Are Us for all your glazing needs. So whether it's double glazing, glass repairs, shelvings, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shell cubicles, balconies, any of your glazing needs, you can get 10% discount if you mention the show, yeah? Please go to Glass Are Us, 7307 Sisters Road. So we'll continue The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. We are on the 6th chapter. Please, if you want to text in, make any comments, the studio number is 079 44 431 366. That's 079 44 431 366. So we're on the 6th chapter. The chapter is titled The Rise of Toussaint Louverture. A little background. They're on island, yeah? They've overthrown most of the whites. There's different groups all over the island, but the British are on the island, the Spanish are on the island, and these people want to enslave the Africans again. Because the San Domingo, which was going to be called eventually in 1804 Haiti, but San Domingo was the richest colony. If you added all the other colonies together, San Domingo made more money for France than any other colony, British, American, you name it, colony in the world. The San Domingo produced maybe about 50 to 60% of all the French income. So it's a kind of crazy amount of money was being created on the island from sugar, tobacco and cotton, indigo and the like. So, I continue, chapter 6. At the first hint of resurrection, he would go himself. The most difficult districts were around Limbe, Plaisance, Marmalade, and Port-au-Prince, the early centres of the revolution in the north, and destined to hold the first place to the east. Early in 1796, for instance, he hears one day that the labourers of Port-au-Prince have taken up arms and massacred some whites. In one night he covers the long distance from Verray to Port-au-Prince. He calls the blacks together and gives them an address on the way that they should conduct themselves. If they have grievances, assassinations is not the way to have them addressed. One of them speaks. For the rest, alas, General, they want to make us slaves again. There is no equality here, as it seems that is in your heart. There is no equality here, as it seems that there is in your part of the world. They look at us with a bad eye. They persecute us. Their provisions are taken for less than they are worth. The whites take their chickens and their pigs, and they protest. And if they protest, they are thrown into prison. And to get out of prison, they have to pay money. The reasons you have given me seems justified, says Toussaint. But even if you have a house full of them, you have to render yourself wrong in the sight of God. They begged him to organize. They begged him to organize them, fix everything. We shall be good. That everybody will be forced to forget what we have just done. Next day, Toussaint calls a meeting of all the blacks in the district. He makes them swear to work hard and be obedient. He appoints a commander. The labourers cried, "Long live the Republic! Long live liberty! Long live equality! Long live Governor Louvet! Long live Toussaint Louverture!" They danced and cheered, and Toussaint left. Unfortunately, there was another insurrection soon after, and the leader and 12 of his friends were tried by military tribunal and shot the same day. Toussaint went again and discovered that the British had been intriguing among them, had given them guns and ammunition. Toussaint arrested no one, fired no shot, but talked to them and was able to lead them back to work. He wasn't always so successful. I went myself to speak to them and tried to make them see reason. They armed themselves, and I received as thanks for my pains a bullet in my leg, for which I still feel some lively pain. But these years, 1795 to 1796, marked the growth of confidence in him by the labourers in the northern province, not only as a soldier, but as a man devoted to the interests whom they could trust all their difficulties surrounding them, the man who was on their side in the struggle against slavery, but his incessant activity on their behalf, he gained their confidence, and among the people, ignorant, starving, badgered and nervous, Toussaint's word by 1796 was law, the only person in the north whom they could be depended upon to obey. So I hope you can see what's happening there, people, yeah? Is that really he was the people to go back onto the plantations and work like good workers. Even though you're free now, you still have to go and work. And they weren't very happy with that. And they had to be nice to the white people who formerly murdered, brutalized them. So we see how it continues. But despite the ignorance and confusion, there was a new spirit abroad. Black San Domingo had changed and will never be the same place again. Whether fighting with the English, Spanish or French, even Jean-Francois, royalist, dismissed Laville's overtures with incisive scorn. Until I see Mr. Laville and other French gentlemen of his quality giving their daughters to marriage to Africans, only then will I believe in all that you pretend, in all your pretended equality. All the French blacks from the labourers at Port-de-Paix demanding equality, to the officers in the army, were filled with an immense pride at being citizens of France, of the French Republic, one and indivisible, which had brought liberty and equality into their world. Officers of different colours would not accept invitations offered to one group. As good Republicans, they refused to bow and scrape before the Spanish Marquis, who raged at the impertinence of these blacks. 5 years of revolution had wrought these astonishing changes. Toussaint always addressed the blacks as French citizens. What will France think if she learns that your conduct is not worthy of a true Republican? He would say, devotion to the Republic and hatred of royalty and all that it stood for fills the documents of the time. Jean-Francois had issued a proclamation in the name of the king, his masters, offering his brothers in Dordogne provisions and arms and all that they are needed from the moment that they join the Spanish side. The municipality of Dordogne made a withering reply. Some Republicans have offered to surrender if they were among us, men low enough to resume their chains. We abandon them to you with a good heart. The liberty that the Republicans offer us, you say, is false. We are Republicans, and in a consequence, by natural right, it can only be kings whose very name expresses what is most vile and low, who dare to arrogate the right of reducing to slavery men made like themselves, whom nature had made free. The King of Spain furnished you abundantly with arms and ammunition. Use them to tighten your chains. As for us, we have no need for more than stones and sticks to make you dance the campanole. You have received commissions and you have guarantees. Guard your liveries and your parchments. One day they will serve you as the fastidious titles of your former aristocrats serve them. If the king of the French, who drags the misery from the court to court, has need of slaves to assist him in his magnificence, let him go seek it among other kings, who count as many slaves as they have brave subjects. You conclude, vile slaves as you are, by offering us the protection of the king, your master. Learn and say to Casacalvo, this is the name of the Spanish leader, that Republicans cannot treat with a king. Let him come to you with him. We are ready to receive you as Republicans should. That was the style, the accent of Toussaint and his men. The British and the Spaniards could not defeat it. All they could offer was money. There are periods in human history, where money was not enough. A growing army and the confidence of the free blacks, labourers, meant power. But Toussaint saw early that political power is only a means to an end. The salvation of San Domingo lay in the restoration of agriculture. This was an almost insuperable task in a disorganized society, dependent on the labour of men just out of slavery and surrounded on every side by the rabid greed and violence of French, Spaniards and British. Toussaint addressed himself to this from the first day of his command. Work is necessary, he proclaimed. It is a virtue. It is for the general good of the state. His regulations were harsh. The labourers were sent to work 24 hours after he assumed control of any district. And he authorized his military commandments to the parishes to take measures necessary for keeping them on the plantations. The Republic, he wrote, has no use for a dull or incapable men. It was forced labour and restraint of movement. But the need brooked no barriers. He retained the confidence of the labourers because he insisted that wages should be paid, and was equally stern with the white proprietors. Whether proprietors or others were ordered to be the respective parishes and plantations. If the proprietors did not obey, their property would be confiscated. From the very beginning of his career as administrator, Toussaint had his policy towards the whites clear in his mind, and he never shifted from it. He knew the owners of property, French today, British tomorrow, Royalists, Republicans, utterly without principles, except in so far as these helped to preserve their plantations. But they had their knowledge, education and experience which the colony needed, and it was to be restored to prosperity. They had travelled in France and the America, and they had culture, which only a section of the mulattoes had, and none of the slaves. Toussaint therefore treated them with the utmost forbearance, being helped by an unwarped character which abhorred the spirit of revenge and useless bloodshed of any kind. No reprisals was his constant adoration to his officers after every campaign. It was their plantation these whites wanted, and he gave them their plantations, always ready to forget their treachery if they would work the land. Once on taking Mirabelais from the British, he found that more than 300 white emigres from the North Province. It would have been the simplest of things to have these traitors to their countries and upholders of slavery shot out of hand. They would certainly have not spared him. He called them before him and made them all take an oath of fidelity to the Republic. Some who wanted to return to their parishes asked him for passports, and he obliged them. Their plantations had of course been sequestrated. Toussaint made investigations and inquiries seeking to get them restored. He appointed whites to government posts with the confidence of the old royalists. I have made Guy military commandant, and Dubosson an adjutant. These are two brave Frenchmen who have contributed very much to converting their fellow citizens. I have confided the administration to Jules Bordet, who I believe is a good Republican and who possesses the necessary ability to carry out this duty. He has a good will of his fellow citizens who approve of my choice. He recommends another white Creole who accompanied him on an expedition and has conducted himself honourably. I feel fairly certain of his civism. What these whites, with their memories of the past, thought of being looked over, examined and granted posts with such an assurance by a former slave is not known, but there is no record of any disrespect or open hostility. They may have hated it in private, but it would have been difficult to get any response. Toussaint had his army of ex-slaves with his ex-slave officers, which he kept intact and free of possible disruptive elements. But he was so genuinely kind to the whites in their distressful condition that they could not fail to appreciate it. My heart, he writes to Laveur at the news of insurrection, my heart is torn at the fate which has befallen some unhappy whites who have been victims of this business. That was the way he felt about all people, black and whites. The whites grew to recognize that he could always be depended upon to protect them from the laborers ready to massacre them at the slightest hint of any return to slavery. As they learned to trust him, many of them came back to their plantations. White women told Laveur the attentions and the assistance that they had received from this astonishing man. called the old ex-slave, and his despised black skin, their father. In Laveur, onwards, the parish of Petit Rivière, where he had visited Toussaint, offered the satisfying spectacle of more than 50,000 labourers back to work, all full of gratitude for the Republic. Blacks, whites, mulattoes, labourers, proprietors, all blessing the virtuous chief, whose care maintained them, order and peace. What must Laveur have thought, ex-count of the ancient regime? The ancient regime is the old royal system, which was always in France, and obviously Laveur used to be a count within that system. And a cultured Frenchman of a cultivated age, as he received week after week the letters from Toussaint, the ex-slave, the very wonderful letters. Some of them rare are. Toussaint was equally the master of proclamations, a delicate piece of manoeuvring, as his epistle to Didoyen, or a military dispatch. The enemy had not taken the precautions to establish on the St. Mark Road reserve camps to protect his retreat. I used a trick to encourage him to pass by the highway, and this is how. From the town of Verrays, he could see all of my movements, so I made my army defile on the side of Marabelais, where he could see it, so as to give the idea that I was sending large reinforcements there, while a moment after I made it re-enter the town of Petit Rivière behind a hill without him perceiving it. He fell right into the snare, seeming even to hasten his retreat. Then I made a large body of cavalry across the river, putting myself at the head of it in order to reach the enemy quickly. And I kept him busy, and in order to give time to my infantry, which was coming up behind, with a piece of cannon to join me. This manoeuvre succeeded marvellously. I had taken the precaution to send a 4-inch piece of cannon to Petit Rivière, to the Moray plantation at Detroit, in order to batter the enemy on the right flank during their passage. While I harassed him with my cavalry, my infantry advanced at great speed and with the piece of cannon. As soon as it reached me, I made 2 columns, pass to the right and to the left, and take the enemy on the flank. As soon as these 2 columns arrived within pistol shot, I served the enemy a true Republican fashion. He continued his way, showing all the time a brave front. But the first cannon shot that I caused to be fired among the men, and which did a great deal of damage, made him abandon the first wagon and then a piece of cannon. I redoubled the charge, and afterwards I captured another 3 pieces of cannon, 2 wagons full of rations or munitions, and 7 others full of wounded, who were promptly sent to the rear. Then it was the enemy began to fly to the greatest disorder, only for those at the head of the retreat found themselves right in the mouth of the pieces of the cannon which I had posted at Detroit, in the Moreau Plain, at the Moreau Plantation, and when the enemy himself was taken in front and behind, and all sides, that the fine fellow, the impertinent Dessors, jumped off his horse and threw himself onto the brushwood with all the debris of his army, calling out, "Every man for himself." Rain and darkness caused me to discontinue the pursuit. This battle lasted from 11 in the morning till 6 in the evening, and cost me only 6 dead, and as many wounded. I have strewed the road with corpses for the distance of more than a league. My victory has been most complete, And if the celebrated discourse is lucky enough to re-enter St. Mark, it will be without a cannon, without baggage. In short, what is called with neither drum nor trumpet. He has lost everything, every honour. If the vile royalists are capable of having any, he will remember for a long time the Republican. And the lessons that I have taught him. I have pleasure in transmitting to you, General, the praises which are due to Dessalines. The battalion of the Sansculottes, above all, which saw fire for the second time, showed the greatest courage. Here is not only the born soldier, but the born writer. The dispatch has the authentic ring of the great captains. Dessalines' corps was a famous corps of white Creoles, and the news of this victory of the black Sansculottes over the old planters spread over the colony, lifting the prestige of the blacks, concentrating attention on Das Toussaint. So as you can see, Toussaint had a great victory there. He outwitted all his greatest troops and stuff like that. So this is Toussaint really rising to the top now. And effectively, he's in, even though Laver was like the French kind of commissioner of the island, in reality, you can really see Toussaint is really running the place now. In administration, as in war, as it was all the same. Laver, from the beginning, seems to have allowed Toussaint's carte blanche, and Toussaint made himself into a whole cabinet, like a fascist dictator, except that he actually did the work. The British have breached the Artibonite River in order to flood the lower part of the plains and prevent his soldiers from advancing further. The rains had so widened this breach that it was at least 200 feet wide. He is blocking it with roots, wood and rocks. He has more than 800 men working at it for 8 days already, and he will keep them at it until they are finished. Because if he leaves it in this state, when the rainy season comes, the country will be devastated by the overflowing of the river and cultivation ruined. It seems to me, he warns Lavey, that you should send some boats with cannon to cruise between Caracol and Limonade, etc., so as to prevent neutral vessels from landing in any of these ports. It is in your interest to intercept the provisions and the help that they can receive by sea. Spain and France made peace at the Treaty of Bale in September 1795. Toussaint warns Lavey not to think that the Spaniards will observe neutrality. He knows them well, and they hate liberty for the blacks, and they will certainly continue to keep contact with the British, and Lavey should continue to guard the munitions. He moves the town of Verrays. It is in a bad position for defence, being dominated by neighbouring ground. He traces the plan of the new towns in the middle of a superb level savannah, absolutely open. War and politics, agriculture, international relations, long-range problems of administration, minor details, he dealt with them as they came, took decisions and gave advice to Lavey. But characteristic of this tact, always as a subordinate, when Lavey, neglecting to take his warning of Spanish treachery, reaped his reward, Toussaint gave him a gentle, "I told you so." Even after the decision that must have known were irrevocable, he submits them to the subjects, as subjects to Lavey as approval. In no letter does he find it necessary to explain any charge or complaint made against him by Lavey. Yet he writes, "I shall always receive with pleasure the reprimands that you address to me. When I deserve them, it will be proof of the friendship that you have for me. A strong personal friendship grew up between the two men, so diverse in origin and brought together by revolution. LaVey was kind-hearted, upright, and devoted to Negro emancipation. Toussaint, infinitely suspicious and very reserved, had absolute faith in LaVey and never trusted any other man, black, white or brown. LaVey had the same feeling towards him, and the letter of LaVey to Toussaint that remains is addressed to the most intimate friend, Toussaint. Amidst all of the military, political and other problems, there is a note of strong mutual attachment. Here is something important. I send you some truffle. Be so kind as to accept them from me, who wishes you the best of health and who embraces you with all the heart. And all my officers assure you of their respect and fidelity. P.S. General, our impatience to see you grow every day. Shall we be long deprived of this pleasure? So he's very elegant, very diplomatic in his words to LaVey, our brother Toussaint. 7 days afterwards, it seems that the visit will take place. I will see you with pleasure, that you will not delay to come to see us here. I await you with the utmost impatience, as do all my men who ardently desire to see you, and at the same time to demonstrate to you their attachment. LaVey, it is obvious from Toussaint's replies, wrote in a similar strain. Toussaint graciously acknowledged his commander's graciousness. I do not know how to express my thanks for all the pleasant things that you have said to me, and how happy I am to have so good a father who loves me as much as you do. Be sure your son is your sincerest friend, and that he will support you until death. My army thanks you for your kind regards, and charges me to assure you of his attachment and submission. I embrace you with all my heart, and to be sure that I share with you all your difficulties and your cares. Yellow fever killed off the English troops in thousands, but reinforcements always came, and money poured into to finance the body of French slave owners, white Amalatu, and black troops. At times, internal intrigues and British money made Toussaint's position very weak, but liberty, equality triumphed, and Danton had known that they would triumph. Toussaint and Regard held the English in check. Victor Hughes beat them in engagement after engagement in 1795, says Fortescue. Is the most disgraceful year in the history of the British Army. It was the decree of February the 4th, which had done it. Toussaint, careful to do everything, sent a personal deputation to the Republic in France to attest his loyalty and inform them of the care for which he was performing his duties as a soldier and protector of the cultivation. Also, no doubt, to explore French politics. Nothing escaped him. He had joined the French and assumed a position in May 1794, and by the beginning of 1796 he was proconsul of his district, governing and fighting as if he had done nothing else all his life. Before such ability, energy and charm, LaVey capitulated completely. In the early months of 1796, all of San Domingo knew that Toussaint Louverture, the black general, stood first in the councils and affection of the governor. So, what's been happening there? Let's say that the French governor, LaVey, is really there to run the island. But as you can see, Toussaint is really running the island. And Toussaint is very diplomatic, very polite language, has kept in there, addressing him as my father, and I am your son, and all my troops are always promise you their fidelity and their trust. So he's very wise man. He loved to be a Frenchman, and really, in the end, that will be his downfall. That he loved to be a Frenchman. But as we proceed, because this is the end of this chapter here, so we're now going to move on to chapter 7. But we've only got short time left. The next chapter, chapter 7, is called "The Mulattoes Try and Fail." So I'm believing that the mulattoes are going to try to overthrow the island and take control of the nation. Okay, because remember, the mulattoes, they really control the south of the island, and the mulattoes always wanted to have citizenship because they've got European blood in their veins. They always want the French citizenship and the rights of the whites. And partly they hated the blacks because of the black blood in their veins. Because, like the French society and the French education, you look down on people of colour, just like they do today. Nothing really changed in the mindset of all these people. So the mulattoes, mixed race people, the mulatto people really hated the blacks. When they had to side with them because the whites hated the mulattoes. Sometimes they hated the mulattoes more than they hated the black people themselves, the full Africans. So these are kind of contrary and dichotomies which we find in the island itself. But the mulattoes would never hide, or would not have blinked, to get power for themselves and to rule the blacks and to act as if they were white people themselves. And I think this French Revolution, not so much the French Revolution, the Asian Revolution, it's got so many different learning curves or learning incidents that we can pick up for ourselves today, because Toussaint allowed all the white people back onto their farms in effect to still become the rulers over the blacks. The blacks weren't enslaved anymore. Allegedly they're supposed to get wages, but still the whites were put over them because he felt they had the skills and knowledge. And yeah, eventually they would want to overthrow all the Africans and Toussaint again, obviously joining with their French compatriots. Yeah. Similarly, think about South Africa. Mandela, he allowed the whites to keep all their land. And what happened? The whites still have maybe 70% of the land even today. And where are the whites? Sorry, my apologies. Where are the blacks? There are a lot more black millionaires and they've got blacks in parliament, but the wealth of the nation is still in the hands of the white people. And when you hear what they say, they're still just vicious racists. Vicious racists. I mean, and this is, that's why we must learn from history, otherwise we'll repeat the mistakes of history again and again. So when there was that big outcry one time that some white person was on a beach, some sort of secluded kind of private beach, and he said into the phone, "Oh great, there's no Kaffers there, it means there's no black people there." And obviously it went viral, and then the business had it to shut down, and he really got it in the neck. But what these people believe, even though Mandela treated them as equals and friends, these people are still sick racists, and they still hold on to the majority of the wealth in South Africa. So the EFF, Economic Freedom Fighters, who are a great party, the Red Berets, these people are the ones pushing the ANC government to do the right thing, to give the land back. These people still got the land, and they're not going to give it up. And they stole the land. They didn't buy the land, so they want compensation. But why should you compensate a thief? If I stole your car, should I say, well, if you want your car back, you can pay for it? Or should I just give you your car back? But these people stole all the land and created all this wealth, which they still hold in the billions and billions, and they're not giving them anything back without a fight. And the worst thing is, the whites, they own the media, TV, radio, overwhelmingly. So they still shape the minds of the nation. So when the Africans, because it's only Africans, there's other Europeans, when the Africans in South Africa attacked other Africans, Zimbabweans, Nigerians, and call them foreigners, it's because the media shapes their mind. So they see these other Africans as foreigners, but the white people who have still got their wealth, who treat them like shit, excuse my language, they don't do anything to them. They treat them as true South Africans. even though they're the ones who oppress them and still oppressing them. So you can see the power of the media, yeah? Some say whoever rules the page or writes the page kind of controls the ideas of the age. So South Africa really needs to think about this. If South Africa was aware of the Haitian Revolution, and maybe Mandela was aware, they would have said, actually, no, we need to take back all our land, because you did not buy the land, you stole the land from us. And the gold and the silver and the platinum and the copper of the mines, you just took all his wealth out, and his wealth is in Europe, it's all over South Africa, in the hands of non-African people. So the wealth has always been taken from Africans and always given to other people, no matter who they are. And when you see the Africans overwhelmingly, the black people in South Africa overwhelmingly, they're still in a similar position they were when Mandela was there. They haven't got the wealth. They cannot just open shops, open businesses, factories, own massive farms. They're still in the same position. So Two-Shot Overture, the whole system on the Two-Shot Overture should really educate us that these people, it's kind of difficult to really to trust them further than you could spit, or further than you could actually pick them up and throw them. Because these people do not change, and we really need to learn this. Am I saying hate anybody? No, I ain't saying hate anybody. I'm saying we must love ourselves. One of the things is we seem to love other people more than we love ourselves. And this is really down to our most recent history, and we've got kind of imposed self-hatred in our community. I was speaking to people very recently about there's a book called Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery by Naim Akbar. And he says in this book very eloquently, and I recommend everybody get this book. If you go online, you can find a PDF, yeah? Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. It's a book we think we all need to read, and I may read it on this show after I finish with the Black Jacobins. But it shows you that many of the things that we did during enslavement to survive, we changed the way we acted, we changed our minds. Into subservient people looking up to others so we could survive. However, our physical enslavement has ended now, but we still carry some of these behaviors and actions into the future, which is very detrimental to us and very detrimental to our unity and our strength moving forward. So sometimes we need to observe and look at what we do, what we say, how we act, and get rid of stuff which is no good, stuff we picked up during enslavement or picked up during colonization. Some of these things we really need to get rid of them if we want to move forward strongly into the future. Because many of the things we do, not many, but quite a few of the things we do is not good. We always wonder why we do this and why we do that and why things don't work out for us. And sometimes we might need to look in the mirror and reflect on our behaviours to see what we do. We can only better ourselves when we learn from our past. If we don't learn from our history, as I said before, we're only going to make the same mistakes again and again and again. So one of the reasons why this book here is so powerful is what we see. It's like a microscope, it's like a theatre, the Haitian Revolution. And by looking at how all these different groups acting amongst each other, we can learn. We can learn. You know that they have these scientists, yeah, white men in white coats with the white rat. There's a book called, by the way, Even the Rats Were White. But they examine and they do experiments on these white rats. And this is really how they rule the world. Because these experiments, what they did on the rats, shows you that you can train people to do the actions that you want. So, for example, we spoke about the Spanish and the French. So look, if you do this for me, I'll give you arms, I'll give you food. This is the same thing they do with the white rats. And they see the behavior, and that's why they use these things. So we can learn a lot by observing how these scientists deal with the white rats. Yeah, you can give them electric shocks to make them do certain behavior, or you can give them like food, and you get certain behavior. And once they see that behavior, they'll do it again and again and again to get the same behavior. Because that's how science works. When an experiment is proven when you get the same results by doing it over and over again. So when you see what happened in San Domingo, we can learn a lot. Because this is a good laboratory of how people act. People with the same similar mindset which is around today of superiority and inferiority and race and races. That's what's happening there. And we can see how people act. Can we know how people act today? Even within this country, we can see how our children are kicked out of schools in numbers, crazy numbers, with other children left in school. They can see that our children are sent to prisons far more. Even people with less criminal record or no criminal record are still sent to prison quicker and for longer sentences with people from other races with serious criminal record and stuff like that. So there is a serious kind of a school to prison pipeline, which our children, fortunately, have like a first-class ticket from. They come out of schools, or they're kicked out of schools, or they don't learn enough, and then before you know it, they're unemployed. Because unfortunately, our community, we are kind of normally last hired and first fired. So this is why we need to do what we need to do for ourselves, so we create our own factories, our own shops, our own businesses, yeah? So we can employ ourselves, because we cannot rely on others, which is another rule of history, to do for us what we must do for ourselves, yeah? So we wonder why we certain way, we act a certain way, but always remember what we do for ourselves depends on what we think of ourselves. And what we think of ourselves depends on what we was taught about ourselves. And who taught us is what you had to think about, yeah? If we're taught by people who tell you at school that, well, you were a slave, and yeah, you had the Martin Luther King, and you used to march a lot and sing "We Shall Overcome," this is all you think you maybe can do. But if your education system told you that, well, actually, you know, you were the first scientist, you were the first mathematician, you were the first people to carry out international trade, you were the first people to write a book, first people to worship a god, then you have a different view of yourself, yeah? So again, yeah, what we do for ourselves depends on what we know of ourselves, and what we know of ourselves depends what we are told about ourselves. And that depends on what we were taught at schools and books and things like that. So this is one reason why we have the Afrocentricity book show. Education is the only way to go forward. We must educate ourselves. We cannot rely on anybody, yeah? Because there's an excellent, if you go onto YouTube, yeah, and type in Dr. John Henrik Clark, yeah? Dr. John Henrik Clark, one of our greatest master teachers. And the speech is called "We Have No Friends." So, Dr. John Henrik Clark, please YouTube "We Have No Friends," and this is what he says. And it shows you that the only friend you have is when you look in the mirror and see the reflection looking back at you. Apart from that, we've got no other friends. So I'm not talking about individuals. You may have a mate or a friend who is a non-African, non-black person, who is a real good mate, and that's fair enough. But as a people, as systems go, these systems are always against us. And as you can see all over the world, the African continent is the richest continent in the world, but sadly we're the poorest people. Because unfortunately, the links created within colonization are still strong. And the people who colonize us are still in Africa, raping Africa, left, right and center. And sadly, Africans still look up to these people because we haven't got rid of that behavior from our colonization and from our enslavement. We think that these people are actually supposed to rule us because we believe that we're inferior. However, in conversation with people, and they said, "Oh, I'll never worship a black god." And I said, "Well, why would a black person say that?" But he's got no problem worshiping a god who doesn't look like him. So it just shows you that the way our mind has been used and abused and modified by our most recent history. So we need to stand on our own 2 feet, and we need to do what we need to do. And we can only do what we need to do when we know ourselves. And when we know ourselves, then we know our history of our group as well. When we know the true history of our group, then we'll have a group consciousness. And group consciousness will give us some sort of unity. And then we can move forward in unity. Sometimes we are happier to sit with people who don't look like us and curse ourselves, and think up every negative thing about ourselves. We really need to move away from that. So one reason why we have the Afrocentricity book show is for us so we can understand who we are, understand where we are, understand where we need to go, because we still got a long way to go. Always remember, we was always top shelf. It's very important to remember, until about 70,000 years of human history, there was only black people. Yes, you heard me, yeah? 2/3 of human history took place in Africa. And for 70,000 years of human history, there was only black people. It's only when we left the African continent and went to other climes that we morph, until we kind of changed into other people. We dropped our melanin, had white skin, had brown skin, and things like that, yellow skin, and different things like that, yeah? So we need to understand who we are, and come together as a family. We're just one family. I'm a strong Pan-African. I belong to a group called Afrocentricity International, and Afrocentricity International are a Pan-African group. Pan-African means that we are all the same people, no matter where black people are in the world. Africa, Europe, South America, Caribbean, China, Europe, doesn't matter where we are all the same family. We've got the same problems, we've got the same past, and we've got the same future. Sometimes we think other people are our friends, but history shows you that we need to be careful of people say they're our friends and turn on you at the drop of a hat, yeah? Okay, so this is Brother Jegna. This is the Afrocentricity Book Show. I'm just about to start Chapter 7. And so I'll start Chapter 7 next week. And Chapter 7 says, the mulattoes try and fail. So we'll see what happens next week. So don't forget to tell your friends. This is the Afrocentricity Book Show. Every Sunday between 4 and 6 p.m. We look at books, essays, lectures through our own eyes, not through the eyes of other people. When we look for the eyes of other people, we want to change the hair on our head. We want to change the colour of our skin. We want to shop with other people, make other people rich instead of our own family. So we need to understand who we are, where we are, where we're going to, yeah? And the point thing is, we must go there together. If we don't go together, we ain't getting there at all. So we must remember, it's not about the ego, it's about the we go. We must go together. If we don't go together, we ain't going nowhere, yeah? Unity is strength, yeah? But it's not just unity and knowledge, it's organized knowledge and organized unity. That is real strength, okay? So this is the Afrocentricity Book Show. Remember, every Sunday between 6 and 4. I hope you enjoy the show. I'll see you next week. And have a great week, and I'll see you then, okay? So I love you bad. You take care. Look after your family. And we'll speak again next week, okay? Afrocentricity Book Show. And always please remember this show is sponsored by Glass Are Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road. You can get them on 0208 800 6663, and that is 0208 800 6663. Please go to Glass Are Us for all your glazing needs. If you mention this show, the Afrocentricity Book Show, you will get a 10% discount. So if you want tabletops, windows, mirrors, glasses, they do sandblasting as well. So you can sandblast your tabletop with your own special image into it, mirrors, yeah, double glazing, balconies, any of your glazing needs, splashbacks, they'll sort you out, okay? Glass Are Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road. So this is Brother Jegna checking out now. Make sure you tune in next week, 4 to 6, the Afrocentricity Book Show. I love and the bad, yeah? You take care. Have a great week. Be safe.
Just vibing right now. Don't be sad. Open your eyes. The sun is shining. The angels are dancing in heaven. You hear me?
Wake up, people, wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up, people, wake up now.
Wake up.
Wake up, people, wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up the people, Lord, wake up.
Wake up.
Father God, in your name I pray. Help the people find their way. Better days are coming by and by. We can make it if we try. Come on. Wake up the people, Lord, wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up, people, wake up now.
Wake up.
Wake up the people, Lord, wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up, people, wake up now.
Wake up.
Father God, in your name I pray.